Hello, Jermaine. I am so excited to have you here today, and we are going to talk
Thank
about
you.
getting our sexy back. So, I'm
Yes,
going
we
to
are.
just jump right in with you, and I'm going to ask you to tell us a bit about who you are, what do you do, and what led you down
Mhm.
this path.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. So, those of you that don't know me, my name is Jermaine. I'm a certified life coach. I say life coach, but it really encompasses life coaching, relationships, wellness, because I kind of think they all, play apart together in a woman's goals and the vision she has for her life. So I am particularly drawn to women that are approaching 40 and in their 40s, and I help them get their sexy back, get their groove back, and really reconnect with that high value woman inside of them. So what brought me down this path?
Yeah.
I think, like a lot of women, just life experience. I have a wellness and fitness background, used to be a personal trainer, did all of that, and discovered that the personal part of the personal training session was my favorite and was where my clients were actually having the most transformation. It wasn't just meal plans, reps, all of that. It was really how they viewed themselves, their confidence level, what they thought of themselves that was impacting their outcome and whether or not they were getting results. So when I discovered coaching, I was like, oh, wow, I can leverage my time. I can impact more people rather than just like a one-on-one session. So that was a few years ago. And here we are now. I love it. I love that particular niche of women in their 40s, approaching 40, because I feel like they encounter different pivots that are very unique to them. They could be starting over, relationship ending, divorce, relationship starting. Just some of them are, empty nesters. They're feeling like, am I going through a midlife crisis because I feel crazy that I really have these big dreams at this point in my life? So I help them navigate those detours basically and remind them that it's not too late. You're just going to take on a new chapter. So
That's amazing. And yes, I can totally relate to that. And I'm glad you said too, this whole idea of people, women thinking, you approach your 40s, like you said, a lot of things might have happened. It can be the end of something, the beginning of
mhm,
something new. And a lot of
mhm,
women I feel do believe that, once we're in our 40s, we're past our prime, we're past the
right.
good stuff. Like the clock starts, ticking a lot
Mhm,
faster, but
mhm,
they don't realize, and like we're going to talk about, there is so much for us in this phase of our life, and it's always more than that. So actually that leads me into my next question, where
mhm,
I'm hoping you can explain to us a bit more what that means to get your sexy back, because I know, from even for myself and for the women that I speak to, we tend to
mhm,
focus a lot on our outer appearance. And so when we think of 40, we think of these,
mhm,
physical changes and whatnot, and we
right.
really associate our sexiness with this, when I know for
Mhm.
myself there is just so much more than that. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on
Ugh,
that.
I love this question, and you hit it right on the head. And especially as of late, I get a lot of women reaching out to me and they're like, well, what does that mean exactly? Getting your sexy back. And then they continue to go down this rabbit hole of their dress size, how much they weigh, what do they look like, how lean they are, what they used to look like, what their girlfriend looks like, their sister. So it becomes this completely outer physical realm that they're associating it with. And like I told you, when I am coaching women, your wellness is definitely a part of that, because I feel like it does affect other things, but it's not just the surface level. So getting your sexy back has to do with reconnecting with that. I'm going to say it again, that highest value woman inside of you, because she's always been there. She just gets buried and covered up. In relationships, we cover her up, we discard her, we completely set her aside and place the man on this pedestal. And our focus becomes all about him. What does he need? What does he look like? Am I doing everything that he wants me to do? When really, what we need and what we value and how we give love, receive love, accept it, all of that is a part of the dynamic that's created in the relationship. So getting your sexy back is about reconnecting with standards, expectations. I always tell people, where were you going before the storm hit? There were things that you liked, that you enjoyed, that made you feel happy, sexy, that you had, not, you didn't need to explain it to anyone, you just liked it. And you disconnected from that woman. And, it's nothing to feel bad about or ashamed. I just like women to know that you can rebuild that, you can reconnect with that. It's super important for getting your needs met in a relationship. And feeling sexy is also feeling confident, which makes you more attractive anyway. So that is what getting your sexy back is really about.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And just like you were saying at the end there, one of the big things, even, above just remembering, what you loved doing before and who you were maybe before, like you said, the storm hit, even just, there is nothing sexier than a woman who knows that she's sexy, right?
That's right. Yes.
Regardless of
Yes.
anything. Just that
Yes.
energy
Mm-hmm.
is often so discounted in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the difference it's going to make in your relationship with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
in your relationship with the man. Because at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, like you said, if he's just on the pedestal and you're just there worrying about, do I look good enough? Do I
Right.
look, you know, thin
Right.
enough for him or
Right.
whatnot?
Mm-hmm.
You can be the
It's
sexiest woman in the world and it doesn't matter. I often tell people, I'm sure you can think of 5 celebrities who
mm-hmm.
are gorgeous, who, aren't connected to their sexiness
That's right.
and can't keep the man. If we bring in the
That's
context of
right.
love, are going through the men,
That's right.
so.
And I think a lot of that has to do with women are raised and groomed that the relationship and being chosen by the man is the prize. That's the win. That's the W, right? But
Mhm.
as we get older, and I also think as you're approaching 40 and in your 40s, what makes us unique is that you realize that your experiences, your life experiences, and also stepping deeper into your self awareness is what makes you more attractive. And it's just, you realize that no one taught you that you get to choose. You get to have standards and that you already have value that you're bringing to the table. Sure, we all want to be like the one chosen, but that comes with some conditions. We would also like to say, hey, this is what I need in a relationship. This is more aligned with me. So I feel like you have a lot of women that were never taught to do that. We were taught to be a good partner and like be chosen and do this. And some of it the exact opposite of men, and so we find
Yeah.
ourselves in these places where we're like, what happened? Well, no one taught us the plan B. If it doesn't work out like that, if you aren't chosen exactly when you expect to be or by the man you expect to be, or just you have a detour, as I say. And like, if you follow me at any point in time, you see in my posts or in a video, I'll say these are detours. These
Mhm.
are challenges in the road that was never meant to necessarily be a straight line, but nobody taught us how to navigate that. Well, what do we do if we aren't chosen by Mr. Right that we thought? Well, no one asked us to consider the possibility that he wasn't Mr. Right ever, or that we bring more to the table than how we cook, clean, and how fine we look in that dress. You know what I mean? So that
And I
is like
think, like you
super
said
important.
earlier, in terms of a lot of times we focus on getting the prize too, like we can fall into that masculine energy of
Mm-hmm.
doing things so that we get chosen, and we
Mm-hmm.
forget to that we are the prize
Right.
at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right.
And being the prize doesn't mean that. And a big misconception or a trap that we can fall into is thinking that you know we have to make ourselves the prize in a way like that the man is going to choose us, like in the sense of us really worrying about how we look for him or whatnot. But when really being the prize is again about being connected to, you know, what we love doing, what lights us up, what, you know, what are our passions and these things that we often disconnect to because, you know, you're worried about what you're going to say, or, you know, how often you're going to call the man, or is he going to call you back? No, like it's being the prize comes from being the one that's like, has her own way, you know, she has her own life and she has her passions, and it's him that wants to be part of that.
Right. I couldn't agree more, because you don't necessarily need to go by a standard that was created somewhere else on social media or by, you know, I'm totally not anti-men. Okay. I love the men, like, especially when you find the good one, right? But you don't need to seek that validation when you're in that position of how you're moving, operating, doing, looking, acting is, okay, what does he want me to do now? Like the robot, the puppet, that will get old and you'll get tired of that. And as you settle into your truth and who you really are, a lot of tension and disruption will come from that, because you really need to be with somebody who was able to embrace who you were already. You can't get tired of being you. You can get tired of a facade or playing a role or trying to meet someone else's expectations instead of your own. So it's definitely not an arrogant thing, or, you know, when we say the woman is a prize, we're not like, girl, you need to forget. It's not that. It's that I'm going to be good with you or without you, but I do need you to recognize what an asset I am on your side.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we answered a lot of the next question in terms of why this is important, especially in love, to get your sexy back, and what that means. So if something comes up, we can come back to that. But one of the things, and again, we kind of covered this, but what are some of the mistakes, and maybe we can be more focused on the answer here for this, but what are some of the mistakes that you see women make when it comes to getting their sexy back, or what are some maybe misconceptions? Again, we kind of talked about, but is there any kind of other example that you see for the women you work with?
Well, you touched on one of them when you were talking about what does the man want me to do, or the dating prospect, or who, you know, making it completely about what he wants and needs is, you know, really dismissing who you are. That's a big one. But one of the ones that comes to mind is not using our intuition as thoroughly and efficiently as we can. And I know there are women that think, oh my God, I think we all have intuition. The degrees are different. You do have to practice sometimes and really give it the attention it needs and deepen that. But we have an internal GPS for a reason. And you hear people say, well, women have this seventh sense. We totally do. If you're dating or you're in a relationship, or you're, you know, like your client seeking their happily ever after, there's a reason that a certain energy comes up for you around a person, or you just maybe have a feeling something is off, or a red flag. You know, when you're driving and your GPS says go left, well, why are you going right? Sometimes it's because you think you know a shortcut. Sometimes that shortcut takes a lot of time and adds more time to the drive. It's the same way I think of our intuition, that ability to discern. Now I'm talking about a whole evolved, a woman working on her personal development, because when you're talking about a woman who's traumatized or wounded, I always say her GPS will be off a little bit, and while she's in that state. But normally, as you're working on, you know, improving yourself and trying to get your sexy back and level up, and you're, you know, you feel pretty clear-headed, and you have, I don't want to say completely recovered, because sometimes that does take a long time from different woundings or trauma. That intuition that you have that kicks in is going to be so important for you, whether you are dating or you're already in that relationship that you want to expand to the next level. Not just intuitively thinking about, is this person right for me? But intuition always it can check yourself too. Like, ooh, whoa, you need to calm down. You need to, ooh, ooh, ooh. You are acting out of fear right now. You're acting out of, you know, some old attachment. You know, our GPS gives us those flashing lights. And I just think a lot of women, they dismiss it because they want it to be something else. And that's one of the mistakes I see.
I love that.
Um,
I'm so happy you brought this up. And it made me think of two things. Hopefully, I don't forget. The first
mhm,
thing, in terms of the GPS, I think I see a lot in the industry and just talking to women, how a lot of times we can get stuck in kind of labels or types of men or types
mhm,
of relationships,
mhm,
attachment
mhm,
styles you hear a lot of.
mhm,
And one of the
mhm.
things I like to caution women with is to also use our intuition with that, because
Yes,
you can very easily dismiss your happily ever after
yes.
by just putting a label on there that you've
Mhm,
seen somewhere. And in fairness, that label could be accurate. But the thing we have to realize, and that we can sometimes forget, is our role in the relationship, right? So sometimes
right.
when we're really focused on the man, we're just focused on what he's
Mhm,
doing. We'll label
mhm,
him
mhm.
a certain term without necessarily considering, if we don't have that self-awareness, we might not
Right.
be considering our role in the
That's
interaction
right.
that can be pulling
Mhm,
that out of the person. So like I say, he
that's right.
could have those traits, or you could be pulling those traits out of him. So if when you do have your intuition, and when you do fine tune your intuition, that's when you can, check yourself, like you were saying a
Mhm,
little bit, right?
mhm,
And help
mhm.
you. And then you do the test. Like, I hate to use the word test, but there are simple techniques and tools that I love to teach my women to say, okay, well, if you really want to see to what extent this is either really true, or
Mhm,
if this is part of the interaction, to do
mhm,
these things, and then you can see how the man reacts, and whether or
mhm,
not, okay, well, these are
mhm,
his wounds, his traumas. He'll actually be repelled by you anyways, which is a
mhm.
good thing too, as
Yes,
long as you have your sexy back and you're connected to yourself. And I
that's
feel
right.
like that's also, when we talk about the deep traumas, and what, that's usually beyond my scope. And I ask, I recommend women also seek some deeper
Mhm,
work for that aspect.
mhm,
But again, there are certain tools that you
mhm.
can use for yourself, again, to change the dynamic in there
Right.
also, and help you moving forward in terms of them
Mhm. And I
and
like
how it
that
turns out.
you, I love
And
what
to
you just
help with
said.
the intuition, sorry, for them to rebuild their intuition by
Yes.
using these little things, because they're going to be traumatized. It's going to be hard to trust,
That's
right?
right. That is exactly right. And I am not like a trauma coach or anything like that. I feel like it's easy to recognize when people are still trauma, like we're all triggered. But the
Mhm.
reason we have to pay attention to those traumas and triggers, or the way where our energy is coming from, like you said, it's going to affect the dynamic. You're saying, oh my God, why is he acting like this? Or why is he responding to me this way? But you're unable to see, because you are not healed, that you may be placing undue expectations on him. And that's like, that brings me to the second mistake that I was thinking of, that you said, a lot of women make. And I think that you place expectations on him that he never signed up for. And what do I mean by that? It's like, you can have a dream about how your wedding day is going to be, your the dress you're going to wear, the colors, who's going to be your bridesmaid, all of this, right? Before you've even found this man. And when you find this relationship, you want him to fall in line with this imaginary script that has already been created by you, unbeknownst to him. A lot of us do this in relationships. We do it more when we're not working on healing those traumas, because we don't realize that we're seeking him out to validate us, to like carry the whole burden of our happiness. And to you, that may seem normal. To him, he's like feeling this undue pressure and the inability to just, let out his masculine energy and be there for you. And you're not receptive. You're not able to like surrender to that. So I think that's the second thing, is we place unexpected, we place expectations on him that he was unaware of. And so when it doesn't work out, if it doesn't work out, we don't even realize that we're grieving on what we had in mind, not
Hmm.
necessarily even the person. And
Yes.
that, I was speaking to one of my clients about that, and she was like, whoa. I'm like, could you remove him and place someone else in your script? A lot of times you are grieving over the script, the story that you wanted to play out, which tells you even more. He was not being allowed to just be his own man. You went into this situation with these are the expectations, but he didn't get to read the script. In his defense, he didn't know what the story was supposed to be. You already
Yeah.
had chapter one, chapter two, the epilogue and the summary all laid out. He had no idea. And we have
Yes.
to go into these relationships with curiosity. Yes, do we need standards and expectations? Sure. But
Yeah.
we need wiggle room for that person to be able to be who they are. You were
Yeah.
attracted to them for a reason, they were attracted to you for a reason. We've got to hang on to that too.
Yeah, and sometimes too, it's the way we connect, we communicate these expectations too, right? Like sometimes if we have the story
Definitely.
all set in, already in our mind, and if it's an expectation, then we kind of, think the guy should know, or he's a mind
Right,
reader, and that's never going to be
right.
fair. Like I wouldn't want anyone to, to
Hmm.
read my mind, or for me to have to read anyone else's mind either.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's just a matter of also how you communicate these expectations.
Hmm.
And because at the end of the day too, one of the things a lot of women, we either don't realize or we forget is the man, when he's in his masculine energy, he wants to make you happy, right?
Yeah.
Like it's his desire. And
Yes.
when we're not communicating this in the right way, and I don't mean communicating like telling him, or
Hmm.
doing
Talking
it
at
in,
him.
yeah, in a very, again, masculine energy way,
Hmm.
he will gladly, if he's the right man for you, obviously, um,
Hmm.
and he's invested and whatnot. I'm just not talking about anyone here, but
Right.
he will want to do the things
Right.
that make you happy. And actually, it's going to be not attractive to him, and it's going to be, if he can't meet your expectations
Right.
also, right? Like that doesn't
Right.
feel good for him either.
Hmm.
So it doesn't feel good for either one of you. So that's a big, and also a big
Hmm.
eye
I love that you
opener.
said that. That's so good because we have so many women, and I'm sure you hear this too, and they're like, well, they don't realize that men get to that point where okay, I'm not valuable to her. I'm
Mm-hmm.
shutting down. Like they feel good being that thing, that person you find valuable, that you can rest in. And our ability to even be able to do that and allow him that and play your part. And it's not the part you play as the CEO or corporate climber. Like that works in our business. That is not the same version of us that he needs at the end of a long work day, or you
Mm-hmm.
need to have a conversation with. You're going to come out as abrasive and harsh and like you're trying to be his mother. So
Mm-hmm.
allowing him to stay open to you really has to do with you, you know, being able to embrace that feminine energy and just rest. And like you said, some of these things do not apply if it's just the wrong man altogether.
Yeah.
It can be the right time, wrong man. It can be the right man, wrong time. This is why it's so important to, get a coach and do the work that you can do. So you come into these situations as the healthiest version of you possible.
And I love how you mentioned too, especially women who are either have their businesses or career women. I work with a lot
Mm-hmm.
of women who come from that space, and I'm there
Mm-hmm.
myself, you're there yourself also,
Right,
so you can
right.
relate. But a lot of times we do bring these strengths that help us either in the corporate world or in our businesses, or get us to a
Mm-hmm.
certain very successful level. So
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of the assumption that if you're doing well in that area using these skills, that they should apply to your man, where when
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times there's unlearning there in terms of
Yes.
reversing those skills if you want the success in your love life. And you see a lot of women who might succeed in their career, their businesses, but their love life isn't, quite at the same level,
Mm-hmm.
or they feel like they have to choose. I see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of women who feel they have to choose. So I don't know if you have any
Absolutely.
thoughts on
That,
that.
yes. I mean, you said it perfectly. Um, that energy of what we do, even in the corporate world, doing getting things done, meeting deadlines, meeting with clients, doing all the things we do. Masculine energy is about doing, right? And so those things help us in those environments. In our relationships with our partners, however, we've got to really fine tune the ability to turn that down, turn that off, and let him do and just be. And for some of us, like you said, the unlearning, no one has ever taught us how to do this. But those type of, that masculine energy of you wanting to, my sister and I always talk about it like rowing the boat, we can't go left and left, and so the man is sitting there like, well, what am I supposed to do? No, just sit there, go. Like you are giving him direction instead of letting him lead. And a lot of times that is coming from a fearful place. You find women that are so afraid they're not going to get what they want, that they are rowing the boat and making the plans and doing the things. And so that man in turn does not feel needed by you. He doesn't feel valued. So there's definitely work to do in, as you know, we all have the masculine and the feminine energies, but where are they most impactful, right? In the workplace, in our businesses, in the corporate world. Sure, we're going to do that. We're planning, we're doing the things, right? But with that man, you have to be able to find that balance of falling back, because I say you need to fall back. When I have a client, she's like, well, and so I told him, and I said, oh, were you doing all that? Were you doing all that with him? Were you like standing and being all aggressive? And I said, what was he doing? What was he doing when you approached him with this conversation? Well, he just doesn't ever listen to me, and there's never a right time. There is a right time, actually. There is, which goes back to our intuition and our ability to discern. You can say the very same thing. Let your requests be known. Let your needs be known from this man who is now much more able to listen to you, because you didn't come in with your boxing gloves on and rowing the boat and telling him, get on the side, I'll do it. Like, whew, you got to be able to have that trust and let him lead and do your thing. Yeah. So,
oh yeah. And even just like, I know that is something I struggled with at the beginning, in my relationship, in my happily ever after. But even just like for women who are, the high achiever type, and I can totally relate to that. And I try to, even for myself, I remind being is doing. If you need to feel like you're doing something, then you can tell yourself being is doing in a way, that. Right?
I love that. So I love that, because for women like us that run businesses or work in corporate America, we have the masculine energy mastered. However, the work for us, the doing, is then going, turning the volume down, adjusting the knob, and we look like we're practicing just being in that feminine energy and watching what we now notice and are able to absorb and receive now that we're not coming from that place. That to me, that's one of the biggest things is, can you turn that off? It doesn't mean you're going to be some doormat, or you can't even see him for who he is, because I always tell women that masculine energy, it shouts, it yells, even if you were not, and I don't mean necessarily literally yelling, even though there's women that like, that masculine energy that you present is so strong that it can just be such a turnoff to the man that we're sorry. I always tell people it's like this. We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected and are no longer in service. That is what happens to him when you're like, it's like word vomit, you're vomiting all your emotions, you're giving instructions. I call them orders. Like, you can get the same result from turning that down and being like, okay. And you're going to have a clear head and be able to really see, check yourself, check that intuition, work on that. And then you're going to see a different side of him.
And it's going to feel better to you. Also, I know a lot of women would say, well, isn't that again, just catering to him? But no, if you stop and think about it, I bet it probably doesn't feel good to you to be yelling. And even if you do think it does,
Mhm,
maybe in the
mhm,
moment,
mhm,
when you look at the result, right,
mhm. Did you get
you're
what
going
you
to
wanted
see,
from that?
yeah,
What was
overall,
the
it doesn't
result?
feel
What was
good.
the
Yeah.
goal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I also feel like when you have, this might be like a little bit off topic, but with the right man, because I am very much attracted to alpha men. And when I say an alpha man, I don't mean like he's got these big giant muscles or, but he's so confident in who he is. Your vision does not threaten him. He fully is able to hold space for all that you are, even when he does not understand it. And he wants to lead. That
Mm.
type of man, it will be easy to surrender and rest in and be for me. Um, there are men that exhibit a lot of feminine energy, and I don't mean necessarily being like, you know, they don't like women. I don't even mean that. I mean they're just maybe more sensitive or more, you know, emotional. And some men like that can bring out your masculine side too. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
about the balance of knowing what you need, back to getting your sexy back to like having that self-awareness. Well, what type of person do I need? And I'm not saying that you can't lead. I personally do not want to be a boat rower. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
I don't want, it's tiring, it's exhausting to me. And I feel like that's what we do in our businesses and in the corporate world. We like make things happen, right? Because we always have to fight or struggle or make sure people know our value, right?
Yeah.
But in a relationship, I want to be able to just know that I don't have to pick up the oar. I don't have to blow the whistle, bark an order, and I can just be. And he finds that utterly attractive and so sexy that he's like, man, look what I'm doing. Look what I got. You know, we all
Oh
want
yeah.
that from our man, but we don't realize sometimes we are the person hindering it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I love to tell women too, like a lot of times women will come to me and, the man's not quite as receptive to maybe do the same. They're not quite as open to the inner work and the personal
mhm,
development, but even just
mhm,
by working on yourself, you can see some drastic shifts and just
mhm,
the way you bring about yourself and how you operate in the relationship can do massive shifts more
oh,
than you might ever realize. um,
absolutely.
I want to make sure we have time to, um, well, before actually, if you could give us one tip, if you could give the women listening maybe one tip, what they could do maybe now, what's kind of the starting point, something easy in terms of bringing their sexy back? What's the first step for them?
Oh my goodness. If I could give one tip, you know, I hate one tip. I'm gonna give you two. I'm gonna give you two.
Do it.
One is, I think being honest and taking stock in where you are right now. You know, taking responsibility for where you are. If you're still that type of person that, and I'm telling you, when I talk to these women, I'm like, ooh, this is not my person. Everybody and their dog is why they don't have their happily ever after yet. Or that man that they were with 5 years ago. Like when you are still in that place about that man, that situation, that wrongdoing that happened 6 years ago, and he's moved on, is married with 4 kids now, and you're like waiting for, I don't know what. My tip is to take stock and take responsibility for where you're at right now and get very clear on what it is that you want, right? That's one tip. The second tip we talked about, which has to do with just healing and working on that inner work, doing the inner work, and I don't want to say personal development. It really does center around healing those triggers. And you know you're triggered because you can feel it in your nervous system. Your heart starts racing. You might get hot. You might feel like all of a sudden you're going to just go off and tell him how it's going to be. Those are signs that you have work to do. And the reason that you must do that work is because your ability to connect with your feminine energy is directly related to those triggers and traumas. It's like
Mm-hmm.
their interference. You know, a lot of this work, a lot of getting your sexy back, finding your happily ever after, it has to do with healing and doing inner work. And some people want to skip that part. They want to say, tell
Mm-hmm.
me where the man is. What does he look like? What do I
Yeah.
need to do? What do I need to put on? Slow your roll. Let's go back a second. And we got to look at some of this stuff that, quite honestly, it's not fun. You know, I'll
Mm-hmm.
have clients that'll be like bothered, you know, upset. And that's okay. That's okay, because dealing with a lot of these things is long overdue. They never did it. Maybe there's a part of them that's still blaming somebody in the past about where they're at. So it's really just about doing that work, recognizing where you need to work, not looking at your partner's faults and what's wrong with him, realizing that you're seeing those faults and what's wrong with him because you're so focused on him. I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he's being good either and doesn't belong to be in the
Right.
doghouse. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that what he's doing, even if it's small, is going to be magnified when you are coming from a place of fear, insecurity, woundedness, you know, unhealed traumas. You're not even seeing the picture the way it really could be. So that's what I would say. Taking accountability for where you're at and working on healing you. The
That
last
is
thing,
so
like,
good.
especially like if there's an old relationship, let's say, you know, let's say you got divorced or an ex-boyfriend or who knows, whatever else, right? um and this is the last thing I'll say because it's really important. I have found some of my clients still waiting on this person to accept responsibility, help them with closure, admit that they were wrong, tell you you were good, you did a great job in a, you know, in the relationship, you showed up. And so you're not going to get that. There's no guarantee you're going to get that. You've got to get to a place where you don't need that, and your healing and working on, you know, taking responsibility and doing the inner work is going to provide you self closure. You
Mm-hmm.
can give closure to yourself. You don't need to get it from that other person because they didn't need to get it from you. They've moved on. So we want to get
Yeah.
you to another place where you realize how valuable you are, how sexy you are, what an amazing queen that you are, that your man is out there going, where's she at? Where's she at? You know, and he's not going to see you when you're in this cloud of like resentment and bitterness. And that's what I tell people. You're hiding
Yeah.
yourself from your baby, you know, your man that's looking for you. He can't see you, girl. You like hiding in the quicksand, and he's like, he's gonna pass you by. You remember the old Rambo movie where he was like,
Oh,
I'm dating
yes.
myself totally. When he was like in the mud and he was like, you could just see. That's what we look like when he's going by. He cannot find you because you were
Yeah.
buried in a cloud of insecurity, fear, woe is me. You don't need to do that, honey. You need to get your sexy back, get your groove back so you can find your happily ever after.
And that is the perfect way to end, because when you're talking about, you know, putting the responsibility, putting the blame on others, or expecting, you know, the man
Mm-hmm.
to either apologize or realize
Mm-hmm.
what he did wrong,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually, when you can release that, that's actually the most empowering thing you can do, right? When you don't
Absolutely.
depend on someone else's actions, someone else's
Mm-hmm.
apology. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, you can get that from yourself, and you work
Right.
on getting that from yourself. That's actually the most empowering thing that you can
Mm-hmm.
do. So
Completely.
yeah, yeah.
It'll totally
So
level you up and make you available for what it is you really want.
exactly, the right one to come
Yes.
along. So for the
Yes.
women watching here who totally fell in love with you and want to follow you along, where can they find you, and let us know what you have going on?
Okay, you can find me on Instagram, Jermaine W. Jones. I have a link, my link tree link is there. So, you know, women that want to work with me privately or interested in my Get Your Sexy Back group program, those links are there. I'm also on Facebook under myself. I think my business page is Diamond in the Rough Coaching, but I have a group program where I work with women in a group for 6 weeks to do that reconnecting with that highest value woman. It's called Get Your Sexy Back. I also have women that want more private attention and they don't want to be in a group. They really want to work on their specific situation. So I have a private mentorship called Proof. So we can work just you and I one-on-one. And those links are in the link tree on Instagram. So
Awesome.
I am so grateful that you had me for this interview. It was so fun.